in progress.
There it is.
Hello.
Well, so we're starting an episode of Sex on the Brain with the beautiful, intelligent, lovely Amy Taylor. And I saw the face. And what were we just I just completely blanked. What were we just talking about? Because I got
Honestly,
distracted. What's that?
old buildings and then Botox. Because
Old buildings and Botox and 20s. And I thought we can't
yeah,
start having fun and talking before I hit record. So yeah, you were saying that you didn't like your 20s. You liked the way you looked.
perhaps that's hyperbole. Much about every decade is fun. I did enjoy, you don't need as much sleep. You can eat junk and you still look great. Every decade, every moment brings its joy, but overall life, I enjoy life more now. And perhaps that's some confirmation bias, because what choice do I have but to enjoy it now? But there's much about this age that I enjoy. And this weird thing they told me, that after 35 you were just going to have to roll over and die as a woman, has turned out not to be true at all. So I've been pleasantly surprised every day.
I love 35. I think your 30s is just a decade to fix all the shit you did in your 20s.
So
It's funny you
true.
say you liked how I probably looked better objectively in my 20s, but I think I like the way I look better now. There's some comfort in you get past all your insecurities and you just don't give a shit anymore. I don't know. Or
People peak at
you can afford better products and
a lot of beauty is just cash. Let's be honest. J-Lo is almost 60 and look at her. And I've been to an event where I saw her up close. It's not Photoshop, it's not filter. Now it probably costs $1 million a year to look like that. But hey, I mean, yeah, I think, and anyway, looks, attractiveness, certainly sex appeal, is about much more than who just takes a pretty still picture.
and
Right.
before we even get into this, because you are really an expert on that. And so can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us some background about you so our
Sure.
audience
So I'm
knows?
Amy Taylor on all the socials. I'm Amy Taylor NYC, if the friends care to read about my nonsense. And I've done a lot of different things. The main things that everybody does, I did not do. I'm not a wife and I'm not a mother. And that freed up a lot of time to both do some cool stuff and to misbehave a little. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. So I've been a worker, and most of that was fine. Some of it was abjectly horrific. We can get into that, but most of it was just dating. It was pretty boring. But I've been in some relationships, but I've basically been single or sort of in relationships, whether they were open or closed. So I have had a fair amount of sex. Again, not sorry. And yes, I do know a lot about sex. I've explored kink and orgies and swingers clubs, and there's not a lot I haven't done, and there's not a lot I haven't enjoyed. And I consider it an honor. I'm very sex positive within the confines of safety, and thank God for latex.
Yep.
It's been fun. I've been very safe and very careful. I'm still 100% healthy, but I am also going to enjoy my life before I die.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Now,
have.
can we just I want to like terminology first so I don't I don't want to be self-conscious about am I saying the right term or not? 'Cause some people are cool with sex workers, some people aren't. I hear escort a lot. I don't know if that's even a good or bad term, frankly. I think you use a term companion
Yeah,
quite.
so escort used to mean somebody that was paid for their time, and unfortunately, even the law in many states has just decided that means prostitute. They're wrong about that. Escorting is legal, and it does not include the sale of sex. Now, many escorts are actually prostitutes. We reject the term prostitute because it's a legally pejorative term. It's usually ascribed to mean that we're some sort of damaged, worthless, used up victim, also predator. Dude, people pick one. But so most sex workers, and the coin sex worker, there's a lot of history in that. I won't bother getting into it. You can do another episode on the history of that term, or you can just read about it. But
I love that.
it was
We
coined to
could
try
talk
to
for
unite
hours.
us. The idea was try to unite anybody who's sort of selling their sexiness. And so I'm talking about phone sex, if anybody's still doing that, dominatrixes, strippers, cam girls, who am I missing? Obviously prostitutes. And that was to try to get some unity and work toward legal rights instead of rescue, which is what a lot of people are doing, and I'm involved in. I am aggressively pro harm reduction. You don't have to like sex work, and for sure it's an industry with problems, to know that these are people who are usually young, usually poor, are going to go on to do other things. Most sex workers don't do it for very long. And if you think they're just throwaway people who should die, then you're the monster. And I don't think most people think that. I really don't. I can't believe that most people would think that.
I think a lot of people are, I think a lot of women are intimidated by sex workers. Intimidated by the idea they're stealing their husband's loyalty, or there's a insecurity with the term. And also, I think
well, then they should be scared of every woman your husband could even meet anywhere. I mean, the sex worker is the last person who wants to steal your husband.
Yeah.
And FYI, most sex workers are in relationships. They have husbands, boyfriends, wives, girlfriends. Many are gay in real life, and they do what they do with the other sex for pay. That happens a lot in porn. So yeah, I've never heard of a sex worker of any ilk wanting to break up a relationship. I think it's often a common female fantasy, this idea of how come this person's getting paid all this money for something I'm doing for free. So there's kind of I've talked to women who are like, well, what do you have that I don't? Well, I have the willingness to not get the ring. I mean, that's it. That's
not it though. Amy and we talked before, and I think our careers, I mean, we have a lot in common and And one of
I didn't have to pass OCHEM to do what I do. So, you know,
well, one of those is, I mean, as a psychologist, a lot of people are kind of doing for free what we get paid to do. And sure. I think we do it better, and we have more experience, and we know what we're doing. And maybe and there are boundaries in place where you know what you're getting, you know when it starts, when it's over. It's transactional in a way that creates safety, because if you're a friend, it can get messy.
And you're not afraid to tell people, to be more truthful, because you're not their family or loved one or friend or whatever. Yes, there's if we were truly concerned, as abolitionists say about when they want to obliterate sex work, which they never have and they never will, but when they argue against this idea that women are doing sort of sexy stuff of any kind without wanting to, there's not this mutual desire, right? The client wants the lap dance. The stripper is not actually turned on. She wants to pay rent and buy diapers for her child. Well, if we were truly concerned about women having unwanted sexy time, then we would abolish marriage, because much unwanted sex is being had by spouses. In fact, men too. Sometimes you love somebody, there's compersion. You fuck them or suck them when you didn't really want to. Mm-hmm. And that's not a crime or a sin. And so doing it because you want to pay rent or buy food, I don't think is any more sinful or criminal. Where there are abuses, those are labor issues, predatory bosses, things like that. And those exist in almost every industry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I say, what made you get into the work that you do now? Like, I'd love to hear more about your story.
Oh, so pretty simply, I went to Berkeley undergrad, majored in biology, afterwards worked in biotech, found myself a very mediocre scientist who did not enjoy it. So I had to pivot afterwards. But anyway, I was in a sorority, and one of my sorority sisters one summer, I guess, trusted me enough to confess to me that she was a very high-end companion. This was in the beginning of the first .com boom, 99. And she was and she told me, she's like, I go across the Bay Bridge to San Francisco and have dinner with some tech kind of geeky guy who's got a lot of money and no time. And I come home with a few $1,000s. I was already a little good looking. I already was dating a guy a decade older. He was almost out of med school. The frat boys couldn't compete. They couldn't even take me to dinner. And this guy took me to Tahiti. So, I mean, who would you choose? I was young and broke, and he was only 28. He was hot, 29. Yeah. So I already kind of liked a dude who could do more for me. I guess I got some gold digger stank on me, and I didn't like being poor. And my parents had lots of class, but no cash. So I shelved that away and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm doing the same thing for you.
Lots of class, but no cash. That needs to be, can we make t-shirts?
Well, rich men like me. I speak French. My family's from Europe. I'm a professor's kid. I do have class. And I know how to act in those circles, but I did not have the money to keep up. And, I had sorority sisters who were rich, and money's not the only thing that matters. But look, having some of it does make life better. And anybody who says it doesn't is lying. It's really, it takes away all your dignity to be in poverty. I had times where I couldn't pull out $20 out of the ATM to buy groceries. and the jobs you have to take and the things you have to do when you can't buy food, there's no dignity in that either. So I shelved this away, thought about it, but I had this rich boyfriend paying for everything. I go to grad school in LA to do an MBA after a couple of years of being in biotech, was bad at it, hated it, wasn't qualified to do anything else, added this business graduate degree. The agreement was I'd go down for a couple of years, he'd pay for it all. Then I'd come back and be a doctor's wife, and he was ready to start having kids and all this stuff because he was older than me. And we didn't make it. Long distance killed us. He slept with somebody else that he actually was into. He didn't end up with her, but she was probably better for him than me. She was a med student. They probably had more in common, but it broke my heart. And then he just yanked the financial rug out from under me. So I found myself in an MBA program with, negative money, like no income and a lot of spending, school, and suddenly no car in LA, which is impossible, and heartbroken and broke. And it occurred to me what this friend of mine had told me a few years prior. And I was like, oh, dude, I'm going to do that. Looked around for an agency to work for. They only hired actresses and models. It's Los Angeles. They wouldn't hire me. But somebody told me, you're kind of the girl next door. You're young enough, attractive enough, super smart. This is, it ain't hard. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do that. And she told me, you just showed me some websites. It's the internet. This is what you need. And the rest was history. Off to the races.
What was it like? Was there an adjustment period? Was it intimidating when you first start? I would think it's a vulnerable career to go into before you really know what to expect.
I mean, I knew enough about how to fully background check people. So I knew, and then the first couple of people who called me were quite famous. We met in public because they probably didn't trust me either. So it was just a date. It was no different than Match.com, which, yeah, you could get murdered on that too, but they were both very well known. And the person who showed up was obviously them. You could look them up and see their picture and learn about their life. And you sit there for a few hours at dinner, and honestly, it was fine. But then right away I got arrested. I didn't know how to screen for the police. And so this guy who emailed me, he was lovely until he wasn't, but he was a damn good actor. That guy should have been in Hollywood. And he said he owned a scuba dive store in Huntington Beach. They vouched for him. I guess they were involved in helping him, and he was very effective at his job. And so that happened. I went to jail for like 2.5 hours. The sandwiches are no good, but I never got to stay overnight and get a suit or anything. They put me in with the drunks for a couple hours, and then I go home and I call my very first client, who is a big time Hollywood agent. And he's like, you're naive and you trust people. I told you this was going to happen to you. Referred me to a big powerhouse Hollywood attorney. She made it go away. They made some technical errors, never got convicted of anything. But then I had a big bill, and I didn't want to just take the money from my client who fronted it to me. I wanted to pay it off for my own, I don't know, my own ego, I guess. So what the arrest actually did was ensured that I was definitely not going to quit right then. And the cop, his name's Tom Giffen. He's retired from Orange County PD. Fuck you, Tom. He tried to pimp me out to his brother. He said was rich, and I was above being a companion. I should just date his rich brother. Honestly, I don't even know if there was a real brother or he was still acting. He also tried to get me to get a minimum wage job at some friend of his cleaning service. I'm like, I'm in grad school. I'm not doing that. No, thank you. So he was just disgusting and wanted to control me. The government wants to control you just like a pimp. They're no different. So it was this idea, you're going to rescue me and you're just going to make my life way worse. You're not helping me survive. You're not helping me do anything. You're helping yourself because now you get to own me, right?
As a taxpayer, frankly, it upsets me. Who is that serving? Who is that helping?
We had a wonderful, wonderful time together, hours and hours of getting to know each other. We had several long phone calls in the days prior. If I had decided to sleep with this guy, it would have been very much because I wanted to. He was attractive, older, my type. Nobody forced me to do anything. It had nothing to do with his provider. Yeah, sure. Generous guys, when you're young and broke, it helps. Welcome to what marriage has been for women for all of human history. Most women.
It seems just like there's more of a contract than it's the same.
Women
like mutual consent where you know what you're getting and you don't have to talk around it indirectly.
Women in most of the world absolutely still care about a man's finances. The phenomenon of women making their own money as much or more than their partners is very recent and very rare. And it's great. I would like it to be 50-50, but we're not there yet. And it certainly wasn't the case for me. So So yeah, that's what happened. And then that year I was overcome with fury. I was like, you're not going to tell me I don't own my body. I can't do what I want with it. I can't date who I want. And yeah, maybe fuck who I want. Like so I was very happy to keep dating my couple friends and paying for grad school. And it was almost kind of a double down of the government, the state does not own my body. You're not going to tell. I have a little bit of thing in me. If you're going to tell me I can't do something, I'm probably going to do it.
I was gonna say it's interesting. I heard you talking earlier about before we were recording about, not married, not having kids. That frees up a lot of time. I'm so curious about what that's allowed you the freedom to do. As someone else who's child free, I love that. It's awesome. No offense to people who do choose to have kids. Awesome for you.
I love my kids, but please allow me to vicariously enjoy.
I was gonna say I enjoy that freedom all the time, but I'd love to hear what that experience is like for you.
Well, and if you have kids, you will be glad you did. Everyone is, and kids are wonderful. We need people. It's great. If I had, I'm sure I would have been glad. Next lifetime, I'd love to join that sorority. There was one guy who's a baseball player. I would have loved to have kids with him. And he's fine. He lives in the Pacific Northwest. He's still cute. That was the one I would have, but it didn't materialize. And next lifetime. But there is the thing of you have to be happy with what happens to you as well as what you create, because not all of life is pure agency. Sometimes things blindside you. And if you're going to just curl up and be fully depressed, well, that's not that helpful. So I do have to kind of make hay with the child-free life that I have. And again, it's not all bad. I've been able to fly planes and learn languages, and I have a million friends, and I can stay fit. And I got a little extra spare cash. I help my family with that. And it's my honor to do so. And I'm the cliche aunt in Manhattan that my nieces and nephews love to visit, because I'm that one. I'm with the rosé and the little dog. Yeah, that's totally me, right? And
I can see you being a cool aunt for sure.
My family knows what I do. It's been very tough for my nieces and nephews. They don't understand. They don't like it. I don't expect them to, but they love me. And that's a grace I don't deserve and I can't repay. And so
how speak more of that.
Well, family, they all have problem. If you know your family well enough, certain family members will have financial problems or social problems or mental problems or physical problems.
Sure.
Like, if you love each other, it's your little tribe. And my family, even despite the things I've done, the shame I probably have brought to them, they worry about me. My father said, I don't have a legal problem with what you do. I worry about you. And that's fair. He's my dad. He'd worry about me anyway, but this doesn't help.
Well, that's it, is I think what father would.
Well, sure.
I don't mean what father doesn't, regardless of what you do for a living.
This wasn't like, he still tells me I should go become a professor because that's a world where somebody with a checkered past could succeed. And I don't know, maybe I will in my 50s or 60s. Who knows what the life will. I think we plan and God laughs. So I point myself by radar toward a goal, and I'm sort of half off course all the time, like a plane, and that's fine. But yeah, I think we love each other and we're there for each other. I mean, if my sister called me and said, show up in Vegas with a suitcase full of cash and don't ask any questions, I'd be on a plane. That's family. And I have done things. I had a stalker that at one point was making, in about a decade ago, 12 years ago, was really terrifying. I had to put him in prison. It was a pimp that I refused to sell sex for, which I was young and naive. I didn't think there were really people like that in this world, and they're very rare, but sadly they exist. Now they got him, they put him in prison. He's now changed his name, changed his life, cleaned up. Apparently he's a father, so I'm glad. But he was a drug addict and a rapist and a pimp. And he wanted to make money off me. He was young and marketable, and this does happen. And stupid me in my mouth, I told him to go fuck himself, where I probably just should have ghosted him. I did not know who he was when I was like, fuck you. And that was real dumb. So, but anyway, when he came stalking, he really harmed me. He bought my legalname.com, outed me to the world. I lost my job. I lost the baseball boyfriend that I loved. I miscarried my child.
Wow.
17 weeks. It was a boy. And I was consumed with getting justice. And so I sued him and I prosecuted, and I won both. The Phoenix police are the reason I'm alive. They got him. I owe my life to them forever. And I was in Phoenix getting getting my flight instructor licenses, and this guy found me. I didn't think anybody knew it, but it was bad. It was real bad. I was terrified for years, and my family came, and my sister said, he could come and hurt us. And didn't you ever think about that? And the truth was, I didn't. I didn't.
I gotta be honest. I have goosebumps right now, and I'm like, I want to tear up.
A lot, right?
Well, you know what it is it's this underlying mentality maybe in your language that it's like you brought this on yourself or brought this on your family. It's such a stigma. I get, you're not going to be in the psych, you're not going to be a psychologist, be in the psych field and never have had a safety issue. Doctors get stalked. I mean, it's everywhere. If you're a woman and you're working in the world, you're at risk. But
Very good point.
when I get someone dangerous who's trying to find me, or I've had absolutely situations where my family has been in fear or at least nervous for my safety because of my job. And no one has ever said, why did you bring this on yourself? Or why did you bring this on your family? It's not my fault.
Yes.
But the stigma plays in, and then you say it's like you're an advocate, and at the same time, I can tell you've lived it and you've felt a lot of that stigma just in the
Sure, of course. When you get told 10,000 times a day that you're a terrible person, I'd have to be totally delusional not to. I read it. I mean, I try not to, but it's said to me. I can't not open up my phone. So correct. And when I try to think about the ways in which I could have done better, you're right. Everything that happened to me, including that pimp. His name's David Elms. Let's name him David Elms, and it's David Nguyen now. Hi, David.
love you, David.
Yeah, right. Everything would be better if my industry were legitimized and given rights. I mean, New Zealand, an escort there, fully, we call it full service, having sex for money, which is legal there, with no bones about it. She was able to sue a client who didn't pay her.
No
and
pun intended.
Yeah. So if we had rights, he would be, people like that wouldn't be in the game because they'd be outcompeted by people with, professionalism and ethics. It would be a real industry with real players. Crackhead rapist would have long been driven out. I guess he'd have to have done something else for a living. But correct. It's criminalization and stigma that create people like him and give them the power. The reason he was raping sex workers and forcing my colleagues to sleep with him anytime was because he could. And the
Because
reason
they don't have recourse, they can't go to.
they're not going to go to the cops.
Exactly. And that I am so on the same page with that. I am absolutely. I think it's sex work and a lot of recreational drug use. I could go on in just different segments of society. I am such a proponent of legalize, regulate, and tax it.
Absolutely. We can't criminalize our way out of any vice. We tried this under Bush with gambling and it pushed it all offshore, and now we're bringing it all back, which, it failed. And the war on drugs is an utter failure. But correct. The internalized stigma, I get told a lot because I'm pretty educated that I should have done something else or could have. I would argue that didn't want to, and this has been super fun, except for the things that the problems that society has created. Those have been, otherwise it was just going on dates, which is the same thing everybody else is doing. It's pretty boring. The few times I've had some wild sex, honestly, I probably would have done that on my own.
Do you think that the experiences that you had, have led you to want to be an advocate for others? Did you have other people kind of supporting you? It sounds like your family was pretty supportive and stepped in for you, but I'm curious, did you have colleagues or anything like that were supportive that kind of inspired you to step in and do the same?
Yes. I mean, my sister works in politics and has never needed or wanted to be a sex worker, but she bravely, openly stands up for us in legislation and there's great politicians in Northern California doing amazing things trying to get us rights. And so she's put her career on the line saying somebody I love is a sex worker. And guess what? Probably somebody you love is too. You just don't know it. Because what CDC estimates, it's 1 million women at any given time, which would be 1 out of every 125 women. So that's a lot of people. I know tens of thousands, just me.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And there's always been the old battle axe women who've been on the courthouse steps rioting. I've known many of the legends. Kristen D'Angelo in Sacramento, who made a very award-winning film called American Courtesans. She's a saint. the work she's done in with the people in Calcutta, where the police now work with the prostitutes there, and the HIV rate has come down every year. They've caught like 1,200 underage trafficking victims. US has not come anywhere near that while spending a ton of money, because India's figured out if they stop arresting them, they'll get better data. Duh.
That just sounds so similar to the war on drugs. Just so similar. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, and as I'm, in the sunset and semi-retired and, knock on wood, have survived it all, I just want the people coming up after me to live. I just want them to live in all ways, not safe from predators, safe from the stigma that drives them into depression and increased drug use that can kill them. All the things that we're doing wrong, I just want it to be better for them than it was for me. If I can make some tiny difference, or try to, by humanizing myself, since I got outed and I got nothing to lose now, then at least you've got to say we're human. You don't have to like me, but you got to admit I exist, and so do millions of us, right?
Yeah,
I
somebody
think a lot of people would. I think a lot of people will like you as they listen to. It's like people have the preconceived notion, and I mean, I guess Blakely and I, we're probably not a representative sample, because I kind of forget there's so much of a stigma just in our little bubble of people that are maybe more accepting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I work a lot with sex workers, so like it's not it. I hear it from my clients, but I don't, like, as far as the people I choose to surround myself with in my personal life, like, don't hear it because they're not assholes. I don't know how else to say that better, but yeah, so it is like sad because I'm hearing it from one end, but in my friends, I'm like, okay, well, if this many of us like aren't assholes, like what is going on with the rest of the world? It's kind of sad.
The
Oh,
phrase that always comes up with me is I'm gonna just cut this out right now because I can't think of it. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. It's always the ones that are, I think, customers who are the most vocal opponents. You're shaking your head. Is it agree?
Totally correct. I was going to say two things. Yes. So because I was very privileged and high end, luckier than most and more expensive than most, I served older, largely white, and always conservative men. I don't think I ever had a liberal client. I would have loved to. It didn't happen. So the fact that they live a lie, and they vote in ways that hurt the very people whose labor they enjoy, will never not anger me. And I've had knockdown, drag out debates with some of them over dinner, been like, and they just sheepishly, it's all about taxes. I just vote this way because of lower taxes. Okay. The conservative male is the high-end escort client, and they vote in a way that is bad for them. I mean, Texas has made them a felony. It's a felony on the buyer side, not the supplier side. They voted for this crap. Well, you want to be a felon, you dummy. But I understand. Many have explained to me why they don't stand up. They don't want to lose their wife. They don't want to lose their business deals. They're in the cult of the Christian right wing, blah blah blah. Especially if they're in the South, because without that, they don't get the loans. They don't get the golf club membership. They don't get the success. So they pretend to be. I mean, you talk about us performing. They are performing.
That's what so they're doing it for money.
They're living a lie. And honestly, the worst part is when the transgressive nature of the lie makes it more exciting to them. But and I don't wish them. I mean, I'd end up face down in a ditch probably if I outed them, and I would never, because they've also allowed me to eat and pay rent. So it is what it is. I've never been able to change the way they vote. I wish I could have. I've tried, but that's not what they pay me to talk about. I get it in there when I can.
You never know. You may have planted some seeds sometimes.
I mean, it's insane to me that,
Probably not.
I know two people who used to see Trump. Why did he sign Fosta Sesta? He was a well-known client in New York in the 90s. Who cares? He was a rich playboy. Nobody cared. Why not just admit it? I don't know what they're so afraid of, because if they all admitted it,
it wouldn't be a big deal.
I don't think so. I guess
their lives big a deal for sure.
What?
I said it wouldn't be as big a deal for sure, because I think it's an area where politics and finance, it's so much more part of.
Well, their wives would be furious, right? But secretly, in the quiet of their homes, their wives know usually, or just kind of don't want to know, right? So I don't know. I mean, I find it, the older I get, I find it so ridiculous that so many people are not telling the truth about who they are. But yet I've suffered with, I've lost friends and certainly had lost access to housing, banking, job opportunities because I refuse to lie about my life. So it does cost you. And I guess they just don't want to bear those costs. I also wanted to add, Blakely, that you work with sex workers. I thank you, because we are shut out from so much medical care. If we tell the truth, we lose our insurance. We are shut out from so much social work, therapy, psychiatry, all the way up to getting meds, because people won't work with us. And if they do, they assume that every single problem we've ever had is because of sex work, which is also not true. And a lot of us have the money and we need help, and we cannot get it because of many therapists worry that they'll lose their whole practice if they're known to deal with us.
Oh my
Which
God.
is,
Like,
Well,
I-
anyone who's listening, reach out if you want to work with a therapist who knows what she's doing and is not going to turn you away.
Yeah, I love my clients. You guys are the best part of my day. So I thank you. And thank you for doing the hard work, like, of advocacy. And it takes a lot to step out. And I heard you so many times, like, saying living authentically and being who I am and being honest about it. And that isn't because you're not afraid. It's because, like, you're kind of like, well, I kind of have to live authentically if I want to be free and enjoy my life.
what else choice do any of us have? I think, sure, when I started, I was like, I'm going to get away with it and do this for a little while and pay for grad school and nobody will ever know. And yeah, sure, that went well. That clearly didn't. Third client was a cop. That didn't work out at all. But when life humbles you, I think it gives you the gift of more humanity, because I
Oh,
know
So true.
that I've got great traits and I'm also a moron. I give that grace to others. So it's great.
And
So
I know
true.
you talked about, like, the fun things too. So you were, like, in the beginning of the episode mentioning there's lots of joy that I've had and things I've gotten to explore. Not many, I think you said not many things that I haven't enjoyed. Yeah, tell us more about, like, how you felt comfortable enough stepping in, because I see a lot of clients, like, kind of, oh, I don't know, like, what I like this, do I not? I'm not sure, like, working with that is interesting, because I think sometimes some of us are like, let's just dive in and see what happens. And there's some people who are hesitant. So how did you figure out what you liked and didn't like within the realm of sex?
Oh, well, so I'm very much an eternal student. I think I'm a professor's kid. I'm dorky. I love science. I like to learn. If I was a billionaire, I would just go keep getting PhDs. So I do sort of enjoy, I have a tiny amygdala, I guess. I have very much interest in things I don't know about and whatever's new. Probably too much. So yeah, and it's been weird. I once went to
I'm
Ohio.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. No.
Thank you for the amygdala reference, and it was an excellent one. You're very and you're an intelligent, educated woman, and we're gonna come back to that and talk about that. But I mean,
Was it even correct? I think it might not have been.
I think it was. The amygdala is right next to the hippocampus. It's involved in memory encoding, but it's a specific offshoot of typical memory encoding, where the amygdala is more involved in fear-based or emotionally, typically negative anxiety or fear-based emotions, where we encode those memories different, because it teaches us to almost have an anxiety response or a sympathetic nervous system response when we encounter something again. So if you have a tiny amygdala, you're probably processing things more on a cognitive, intellectual curiosity level, and not letting fear drive you, is how I took the reference. And I
I'm pretty
appreciated it.
There was a fascinating study, not out of my alma mater. I think it might have been out of Stanford. I forget, but they gave people these questionnaires and they put them in a room. And the point wasn't the questionnaire. Out of the vents, they started pumping in the smell of sewage, and people started answering more politically conservatively the more they smelled something kind of ew. And the professor talked about the amygdala as the center of revulsion, of like you said, fear, and like
Uncus, the uncus. The uncus.
huh?
The uncus is the center of disgust.
Is that a real part? I don't know what that word is.
Yeah, the uncus, it's deep down and kind of in the frontal lobe, right? And in animals, it is particularly used in the physical smell of disgust to tell if food is rotting or spoiled. And in humans, we've adapted our uncus to where it responds to societal disgust or social disgust, things that we find repulsive, or that feeling you get when something's taboo or just feels moralistically wrong.
Mm.
You shouldn't do it. It's our social uncus. It's the same thing in animal when they don't know why. They're just like, oh, I'm not going to eat that. It's that feeling. Oh, I don't know if I should do that.
And disgust
yeah.
just draw emotion, so it's like you're naturally going to pull away from.
And the uncus and the disgust and fear, the uncus and the amygdala are disgust and fear are tied to one another. If you're disgusted with something, you're going to be afraid of it.
Yeah, that's the reason I fly planes and do what I have not enough fear, which is annoys my family, but it's how I'm built. And it's also created a life that has not been boring and has been fun. And so, yes, actually, the guy, I flew to Ohio and he seemed normal, but he was drinking like 3 martinis at lunch. And I was like, oh, you're just nervous. It's a date. It's, first date. It's fine. Super nice guy, white bread, Midwestern, owned a company, normal, right? Well, we decide we like each other. We decide, yeah, we're gonna hang out. Why not? And so this go up this beautiful place, and he tells me that and nothing's going well. I'm like, oh no, like you don't like me. I thought we had chemistry. But I then find out that he can only get a chub, and it gets harder the harder I hit him in the nuts. And I mean like wind up like a baseball pitcher on a mound, not just.
And you get paid for that shit? I would do that for free.
Yeah, well, I'll give him your number. No, I don't want any part of it. That's your problem. I don't want any part of it.
Not necessarily but like just whack. No,
not only did he pay me, but he paid me about 5 times my rate just because he liked wasting money, I guess.
But I mean, like as like not a playful, but really he wanted.
Oh, like first I was like, all right. And was I grossed out? No, I was like, what the hell is this? I was fascinated.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I mean, it was abject pain that made him feel good. And so, and I knew him for a while, a couple years. He still once in a while emails. I didn't end up going back. I referred him to a much more professional dominatrix with a proper dungeon and the tools. And like, they're very good about consent. And it's quasi legal in most places because it's definitely not sex. And so they don't get rated that much because you're not fucking. Whatever you're doing. It's 100% legal here in New York, like by law, and other states kind of just don't, they leave it alone. I think Ohio does. I'd have to check with the law, but he ended up going to somebody who knows more than me because that wasn't something I knew about. I was learning on the fly, but I did remember thinking later, like if wires are crossed in his brain such that really severe pain feels like pleasure, is there any danger that he would think that's true for me? Because it's not. And could I, get hurt? But nothing like that ever happened. He was quite meek and lovely, and I'm assuming still is. We exchanged a Christmas email once. But that was the strangest I've ever seen. Somebody who literally physical pain registered as pleasure. I don't know how that happened or why. He complained that his spouse found it unacceptable, and while he loved her, that was a real problem for him because his needs were not being met. And,
I wonder if he had a high. The neuropsychologist in me, I'm wondering if he had a high pain threshold, and so you kind of had to go to the most sensitive part and really go at it to get the same level of maybe a pain sensation that someone else may not need to target such a sensitive organ to elicit. The connection between arousal, sexual arousal, and fear arousal is quite normal. Quite normal. And I have had so many veterans that I've worked with who they're so humiliated and embarrassed and think there's something deathly wrong with them because they've had experiences in war where they'll get an erection in some kind of life death situation. It's arousal. Your body's aroused and it doesn't necessarily know why always. So it's a common thing. So just FYI, if anyone's had that happen to them, you're not crazy or a freak. Maybe you are, but it's not because of that.
Pain can also be super grounding too. Like I think some people have a hard time being in the present moment. So pain is something where it's like bringing me here right now versus not a sensation.
And it's it's vulnerable. I think we all have that love-hate relationship with vulnerability where we're scared of it, but then once it's exhilarating.
Sure. People also like to give in, especially in my experience, men who are successful and make decisions all day. Everything's about them. They quite enjoy giving in and not being the decision maker. My hair's naturally a little darker. I kind of look like a dominatrix, and especially now that I'm older. That started happening in my 30s. I don't know why men can't register that young women could be dominating. There's a thing called FinDom where they're financially dominant online, but in person, dominatrixes are usually a little older, at least over 35-ish. But so I have seen that a lot of men do enjoy being the pursued and being the one who doesn't make the decision. I guess that's because they get that opportunity less often, typically.
Mm.
And I think too, it's it's you're making decisions. It's also just receiving the attention and receiving. I think men in positions of power, they live their life. It's got to be a double-edged sword, because the success you attain and the financial stability you attain is a big part of your ego. And then at the same time, on some level, you know, your wife probably wouldn't have married you if it weren't for the amenities. People may not be, you're never really going to feel like someone is necessarily attracted to you for yourself, as opposed to what comes with it, what you've earned, what you have. And they're pursuing women who like to be pursued and like to feel attractive and like to feel wanted.
Mhm.
And feeling wanted is so human. I wonder if it's not even the decisional making so much as just feeling desired, feeling pursued.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one client once say, he's like, I'm just a paycheck for everybody. I was like, well, you were the one who wanted to be the rich guy long ago. I mean, it's a bit like beauty, right? We like to be pretty, and then we just don't want to be just valued for it, right? I mean, we're all babies. We all want everything. It's normal.
I think it's also like potentially, I've seen clients who want that version of, you know, have a dominatrix because it's like, I want to know that women are still strong. Like potentially my experience with them has been like, I'm too much, or they're, you know, like I want to feel that they're empowered. So like I have seen people go in that direction as well, not just for the role reversal of like, I want to take a seat and have someone else control things, but it's also I want to see women as empowered and strong, and this is how I'm doing that.
Sure. For many men, the Buddhists call him Shiva, right? The destroyer energy. They'll take a woman who's very strong and retire her from her work, especially if they're super successful. There's no reason for her to work anymore. She'll start staying home, working with the kids, and then 10 years in, they find themselves very bored by her. And it's their own success is doing, and maybe logistics. They got a bunch of kids. It just makes sense. It's nobody's fault. But then this is often why they love whores, because then there's some wild independent woman who's out there that's just interesting. Not that they want to, and they don't want to leave their wife. They love her. They worship her, but this is just something different. Like she's stronger, she's wilder, she's freer. It's nobody can be all things, right? And so it's pretty normal to be, both for men and women, to be interested in different types of people, right? Different lifestyles and power levels. I mean, that's not abnormal. I like a guy who's
people vary on this spectrum to which they connect love and affection with sex.
Yeah,
you feel you can speak to? You've got had a lot of.
I'll never stop wondering why they feel so accepted and loved just because you'll sleep with them. And then also sometimes feel shame and wonder. And I've seen it where they're so obsessed that they finally got laid. And then immediately the post-nut clarity thing, they're like, how many other guys get this? And then they like you less after there's a lot of mental gymnastics going on, but yeah, the Eastern people, they call the penis the heart chakra, that to feel love, men do need sexual attention. I don't think that's entirely true, but I think for some men, they almost can't be vulnerable in love if they're being, I hate to use the word denied, but if they're not feeling sexually wanted. I've seen that a lot. And yet at the same time, they're scared of sluts because the one who sleeps, if their partner sleeps around less, at least they're pretty sure she won't cheat, right? So they'll often marry somebody who they think likes sex a little less, and then be dissatisfied with it, right?
I think
I-
vulnerability plays that role too, though, because it's kind of like with therapy. Like, it's easier to be vulnerable with a stranger sometimes because they're like, okay, well, like you're not in my life. Some clients come in and they're like, you're not in my life all the time, so I can tell you everything, but you're not living here, seeing me every day, cooking breakfast with me. So it's like I can't help but wonder if that also plays a role of, you're not in their lives constantly
Oh,
watching
sure.
the kids together or doing laundry and shit.
Well, to
Yeah, no,
piggyback,
no,
sorry. To piggyback off of that, there's also, I think people come into our office, I think, to make yet another comparison. It's like they think we've heard worse, which we have, and there's a desensitization that happens to the spectrum of human behavior and thought, where no one wants to make someone else uncomfortable or make someone else feel disgusted or judging them. And there's got to be some comfort in you're sex positive. You've had, I'm sure, more variety of experience than their wives probably have, and that's going to make someone feel more comfortable exploring.
it can also be intimidating because like there's probably nothing I haven't done. But
I was so there. I wanted to ask about how much performance anxiety is a thing in your field, because it's like I had, when I was growing up, we had this dog. We lived out in the country, and whenever deer would come in the pasture, the dog would race out there to get the deer, and just like 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And there's this one time this deer, it was a buck, just didn't move. And you watch the dog, it's just, and then it gets close and it's like, never mind. And it just moseys on away.
yeah, what do I do now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is that where certainly when I've been in these very long relationships, a couple of which I have, and we're old friends, and they'll talk this big old game about what's gonna happen, and then they just want to be the little spoon. And it's great. It's fine. It's lovely. But I think I've had ones who wanted to learn from me, and I've been very happy to be to some degree a sex educator. There is a certain type of man who, before he dies or gets old and can't do it anymore, does want to have more of a wealth of sexual experiences, doesn't want to push that on his wife, or even, like you talked about, be vulnerable with the love of his life in case she rejects him. That's a bigger problem. If I don't like him next, I'm utterly replaceable. They might like me, but look, there's a lot of me out there. If they don't, or I don't, it's fine. There's not just one good restaurant to go to, right? So it is safer. And I think some of them do want to know what's in the poker hand that they could learn from. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. And when I can be an educator, I mean, I've had relationships where I've, taught a guy that you need lube for anal. I mean, Jesus Christ, how do you not know that, sir? Well, I guess all you watch is porn. They cut that part out sometimes. So there's people running around trying to do that raw. Guess what happens? It feels horrible. You tear flesh. Nobody likes it. And then they think, oh, well, either I'm bad at sex. Okay, maybe you are for not reading correctly.
If you're going in dry and anal, then I think you are kind of bad at sex, probably.
Honestly. And you do need to know your anatomy. If you're just too big, it's probably not going to be for you. If a guy has a huge dick, that's not going to be the thing he's going to get a lot of offers for. And
can't always have your cake and also fuck it in the ass.
I mean, but there are women, and I don't judge anybody, who like it if it's done properly with, like, however much lube you need. People, if you're watching this, use double. Just use a lot.
It's like garlic when you're cooking. Just whatever the recipe says, more, right?
And then if it doesn't hurt, you're going to have a good experience. The person's not going to hate it. You're going to feel we all have sexual ego. You're going to feel like the man. Or if you want to get pegged, I mean, I've met countless men who want to feel that experience. They're very scared to ask for it because they think it's gay. I mean, dude, last I checked, I'm a woman, so that means it's not gay. And who would care if it was? I've met tons of men who are fluid, and they're very afraid to have the experience of being with somebody of the same gender or trans. The only place they can get that done is in private with sex workers, because they're too closeted for reasons of their real life. And that's a shame, right? We confine each other as humans. And look, I've been in love and been sexually jealous myself. So We're
Can you-
possessive.
So as someone who has been in love and been sexually jealous yourself, how does that affect you? Because we think about the wives, we think about everyone. How does that affect you? I mean, if the guy's married, that's gotta.
Yeah, it's not great. I've had 3 wives call me now in a lot of pain. Every time the guy was like, okay, just answer, because they won't stop calling. They want to yell at you for a while. And I let them.
Do
There's
you
one
bill
who
for that time? I would bill for it. Do
I
you
mean, I
know?
should, right? I should. The guys, they get caught, and then yeah, and once, so the drunk voicemails one has still been leaving lately. It's been about a month, but she's probably not done. Those are fun. Uh, she gets drunk and likes to leave nasty messages like at 3 a.m. But uh, one wife stayed with her husband. He probably slept on the couch for a while. They're still together. Uh, she made him promise I'd never see him again. I gave her my word, and for my own safety mostly, I stuck to it. He then used me for a reference about 2 years later to meet somebody new. So apparently he went back to it. Not my problem. I wish them this. One wife divorced her husband. They are both very happy single. They had filed on each other back and forth several times over the year. I think it was just a toxic marriage.
Mhm.
He's remarried and very happy. She's single, to my knowledge, and happy. She was pretty mad at me, but he had lied and said it was only me. I told him I'm gonna tell her that I'm one of several, and you've been doing this for decades with others, because it's not fair for you to tell her that I'm an affair and she thinks I'm trying to steal you, and none of that is true. This was sex work. And once she found out what it really was, she was a lot less angry, a little bit angry about money and things, but she had been told that it was an affair and I wanted her husband, and that was not true. But it doesn't feel good. I wish everybody I had ever met was single. That would have been easier for me. Their marriages, I usually don't know a lot about their marriages because the clients lie.
Do they? I was wondering, are they? I would think, are they? They might be more honest. I don't know.
Some are, some aren't. A lot of them love to tell you that their wife is completely distant from them, and it turns out that's usually not true. I don't know why they say that. Either they want you to pity them, or they just
They don't want you to think they're an asshole, and they're justifying what they think is not correct behavior.
And I don't think people are assholes for sometimes wanting variety. I think you can very much enjoy one person. It's kind of like I love pizza, but sometimes I want steak, right?
Yep.
I wish when people got married, they understood each other's sex needs more. But even if they did, even if people made sure they were compatible, it can change.
That's it. That's it. You don't know anything in your 20s about who you're even going to be or what you're. So you can have all the conversations you want. You can't look into the future.
Precisely. People age differently. Some people have physical problems, or we're not talking enough about menopause. They're making great strides in medicine on how to handle that, but there are some mechanical problems in menopause that drive men to seek other things. There's also men's own issues with aging, why they seek out younger people, because they're afraid of their own waning prowess and things. But yeah, it never feels good. And then in my own relationship, this is insane. I was jealous with a guy sleeping with other people, even as we had an open relationship, and I was. But I still felt it. I was like, I want you to like me the best. Even if you're allowed to do what you do, I still want, I'm scared of abandonment. It wasn't the sex. It was that I want to be number one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Did you tell him? Did you communicate about it? Like, how did you?
This is like 20 years ago. And it was the baseball guy, back to him. But yeah, we did. Of course, we communicated and things ended up fine, but I still very much felt feelings of like worry, even though the rules were set. And I'm a human being though, right? Just wanted to be number one.
The comparison piece is interesting because I think we all do it all the time, right? It's like, am I good enough? Are you looking at someone else? Of like, if I'm in an ethically non-monogamous relationship, like, am I the favorite? Even though it's like, okay, I believe in loving with an open palm, but still, this is difficult to share.
My friends who are poly and swingers and things, there's so many rules, and people still violate them. And there's, humans, we're always going to be humans. And it's a wonder. My parents are in their late 70s and early 80s now, and they say it's such a relief later when it's like your best friend and you're just getting old and it's not that much about sex anymore, and it gets a lot easier. So if I have love later in life, whatever it looks like, whether it's lots of little lady friends or some kind of guy, I think it'll be a relief when there's maybe a little less ego attached to it all, if there is.
So many problems with sex. It's we project it onto the other person, but the difficulty with sex is very seldom how we feel about the other person, and so much more often how we feel about ourselves with that other person.
Sure. I've experienced that men are often not necessarily sexually attracted to the most perfectly beautiful woman. It's the sexually confident one.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone up and down 20 pounds, been tan or pale, or, you know, have a bruise in my thigh. They do not care.
I don't think there is anything more attractive to men than confidence.
Yeah, your boobs, they're fine. They're all slightly asymmetrical. That cellulite on your thigh, he does not care. And sometimes when you're not quite as perfect, there's more permission for them not to be, because they're worried about how they look naked too, and whether they smell right or taste right, or yeah, everybody's sex is ridiculous. It's vulnerable. You're naked. It looks funny, right?
And hint to everyone out there, I was gonna say the ladies, but this exactly, men have these insecurities too. It's all of us. I think sometimes that, we're attracted to confidence. I think a lot with, women, when we feel insecure, that men find confidence attractive. And I think it often feels like one of those things that sounds nice and we say it, but it's bullshit. It's so true. On a neurological level, we are social beings so much. We constantly seek social cues to make our own decisions and validate our own perceptions, that if you are acting confident, you are actually going to look more attractive, because the cues you're putting out there that you look good are going to feed him into agreeing. Whereas if you're super self-conscious, we feed off each other, and we want to make sense out of things, and we think in stories. We want to tell stories and have things make sense. And so if a woman seems really insecure about her stomach, then it must not be very attractive, because she doesn't want me to see it. Whereas if you don't give a shit and you're just free and out there, I mean, it makes sense. Well, she must be attractive. She's acting like she's attractive. I mean,
100%.
It regulates your nervous system too. I mean, in a weird way, think about going to the doctor. Like if they seem very confident and you're listening, like you're calmer. But if I always tell my clients, like, if you came in and I was like, ooh, that sounds like really bad, and I respond like that, like,
am I doing a good enough job?
I gotta get out of here. Like, it'd be the same thing if I went to the doctor and they're like, oh God, that's so bad. It's probably, I would be panicked. And it's like, that's not sexy. I can't have sex and feel like ready to go if I'm anxious. So,
absolutely.
Calm is a superpower. And yes, it's actually a safety issue for a lot of sex workers. If you're what's called out call, you're going to visit his hotel suite at the Four Seasons or his home. It's actually a safety issue. And we talk about like walk in there like you own the place, because first of all, it's classier. You don't say, oh my God, I've never been on a private jet before. Like, don't do that. Even if you haven't. And also, like, if you're not combative and domineering, but you're authoritative in a calm, polite way, then people will usually fall in line and follow your cue. It's exactly true what you said. They follow your energy. And it can be a real feather in your cap, even safety wise. And that applies to actually civilian dating too.
Because when you're nervous and you look scared, it's the same thing. Well, they must be vulnerable and easy to attack because they're scared. Walk in a room like you own the place. Well, she knows where she's going. She's probably meeting someone. She's not alone. Seems like she has status just by how she's holding herself. So someone's going to know. We constantly, we're picking up on those signals and cues. And I think women in general, society has pressured us to be more reactive, because there's so much pressure to be responding to other people, responding to their needs. We're primed to be caregivers, which makes us reactive, and it takes our control away. And we don't recognize the power it has to establish our own stimulus value to be in charge of how we're perceived and to own it and to feel good about it.
Absolutely. I think, while they say men are the head of a household or of a society, women are the neck, right? They turn the head. Uh, and for sure, like, even if you're just, yeah, walking alone onto the subway or into a parking lot at night, if you're a harder, I mean, the reason we screen in my industry is that it's even sort of, we even joke about it, that if you're going to try to make me a victim, you're going to get caught because there's a big paper trail. Someone knows that I screened you, that you paid me a deposit. I mean, so if you really want to murder me, fine, I'll be dead, but you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. So think about it. Sort of a joke, but the idea is it does scare away bad people, because the serial killers, they look for a person who is a person that nobody's going to look for, and that doesn't have this kind of leverage. And
Criminals they want to escape the consequences of their behavior. So you're making yourself safe when you're putting cues in your environment that you're not going to escape your behavior. You're going to be accountable to it. It's
hopefully, I mean, there's probably some abject psycho somewhere who just doesn't care, but I think that's luckily very rare. The buck that stood there in front of your dog was like, he didn't have to hit your dog. He just had to say, like, I'm not the one, sir. Right? And then your dog was like, oh, never mind.
Is that confidence easy, or did you kind of have to fake it till you make it? Like, you know, did that come naturally to you? Was that something you honed?
I mean, I knew that ever since I was like 16 years old, the top guy in the room, status wise, always liked me. So it was who liked me, and it honestly was who I liked. Yeah, that happened early. So I never thought they were above me, because they already were the ones always begging for my attention. Ever since I was in my older teen years, they were the ones begging me to go out for a glass of wine or to theater. So I didn't have to, was not intimidated by them. Their money, later I saw what their money can do, but I knew enough. I'm not an idiot. I know you don't pick a fight with a billionaire because you're not going to win, right? So like a couple times I didn't get paid by very regular clients I had known for years. Fine. They had bought me so much stuff and been so good to me. It was probably all a wash in the end. Oh, well, but they both ripped me off on the last trip, which were in both cases very long trips. It was a healthy 5 figures each time. It affected my finances for a couple months. And I never got my money in either case. They both said it was the same thing. You're not going to date me for free. I'm now mad at you. I'm not going to pay you for this last time together. Okay, fine. Those two men were both self-employed. No one can fire them. There's no leverage I have. They're super powerful. It's an unenforceable contract in court anyway. I just had to let it go. I definitely lobbed a few fuck you emails. And one of them emailed me like 2 years later and was like, I want to make it up to you. And I was like, fuck you, keep your money, which was real dumb. I should have gotten my money. I never, but it felt good to say, I don't need your money. It was probably really stupid, but that's what I did. So you have to know when you are outclassed. And I knew enough to know that some really rich, connected, powerful guy, I'm not going to win a fight. So, but most of them don't do that. They're so rich. You're about as important to them as their pilot or their driver.
And you're as dangerous to them as they are to you, because you hold a secret they don't want outed.
Some of them, that's true. Others, especially from other countries that are more progressive, they tell everybody they like women like me. They don't care.
Well, it seems like both ends of the spectrum, there's a stigma. And at the same time, I think it's also in many cases a status symbol. Like when you got an expensive
something.
Yeah, it's
in this city in Manhattan, every real estate agent shows condos to some guy who's buying it for whoever, keeping her up there, you know. Yeah. Yes, it is. However, it does give the wife leverage if she decides to get out and take half, which they often do. And when they choose to, I get it, man. They can make that decision, because if they gave him kids and supported him for decades and he wants to go be single again, then fine. But there's a severance payment, right?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so I'm getting the wrap it up.
Okay.
We're out of time thing, but I have to ask one more question. And I imagine you get a lot of questions about sex tips because you are professional. I think really you're a professional dater. And I want to know, what are your best dating tips for women? Because you go on so many dates. I'm talking before you get to the bedroom, conversation, managing expectations on the front end, what's the best dating advice you have as a professional?
Be curious. I mean, people are endlessly fascinating. Same in your guys' business. And give yourself like rest the night before and pampering that day so you're feeling good about it. And be curious. Everybody's got a life that is fascinating. And even if you don't like them and you come out of that date going, I'm never going to hang out with you again, it's still a nice drink or coffee or meal. And it's still the pleasure of another human soul, which is a precious thing. Even if it's not going to be the love of your life. So go in with curiosity and just let yourself have fun. I think humans are so precious and they deserve to be treated with respect, even if it's not the one that's the right one for you. So don't go in assuming the worst. Don't go in assuming this is just going to be bad. And if you feel that way, then you're not ready to date, and maybe do a little work on yourself before you're ready to head out there again. But
I love that. I love that advice. And I think it connects well with, there's a connection between pampering yourself, getting rest and feeling good, and being curious. And that when we're self-conscious, the term, I think self-conscious, we use it as insecure. We're conscious of ourself. We're self-focused. When you're feeling not good about yourself, it makes you self-conscious. And then you're so focused on yourself that you can't engage and connect with another person. So do the work on the front end, whatever it may be, to get yourself in a mental space where you feel good, and then be in the moment and learn something. And I love that advice. You can meet someone who would be a terrible boyfriend or husband, and it doesn't mean the hour or two or however long you spent wasn't meaningful, or you didn't learn something or gain some kind of experience.
Yeah, it's all experience.
It's all experience. Thank you so much. Can you plug your, where do people follow you?
Oh, I'm on all the socials, Amy Taylor NYC. So come say hi.
Thank you so much. I don't even know how to stop. Oh, here it is.